Hello, I'm happy to welcome you for this new edition of Initiative Africa, your appointment with a continent on the move, coming up today. Our guest this week is Mabinuori Kayode Idowu. You might not know him, but you surely know the one he used to work with for years, Fela Kuti himself. ID, that's how everybody calls him, has dedicated his new book to the late king of Afrobeat. Our guest this week is from Nigeria. For years, he was the former associate of legendary and rebellious Fela Kuti, the king of Afrobeat. Mabinuori Kayode Idowu, aka ID, has just released a book entitled Fela, Phenomenon and Legacy. Umaru Bari met him.
ID, hello.
Hello.
Thank you for answering our questions here on Initiative Africa and for inviting us to your home in Paris. Fela, Phenomenon and Legacy is the title of your latest book on the king of Afrobeat, Fela Anikulapo Kuti. This is the second book you have written on this Nigerian musician. Wasn't one book enough?
For me, I think Fela is multifaceted, that so many books won't even be enough to express who the man was. And as you must have noticed in your research, there are so many books out there saying a lot of things about him. But then for us who are privileged to share his life, to share his struggle, I think even one book is not, a second book might not even be enough to explain who Fela was.
And for younger generations that possibly don't know about Fela, let's just say that he was a singer, saxophonist, and musical conductor, as well as being a very influential political figure in your country, Nigeria. Today, 16 years after his death in 1997, he's still a Pan-African icon. Is this a well-deserved reputation, you think?
For me, Pan-Africanism is the only solution to Africa's numerous problems. And if you have somebody who was like an icon or who used music to define that stage of thinking for the continent of Africa, I think it's the only way the younger generations can now have something to look up to. I mean, he used music, whereas the people before him, I'm talking about the Pan-Africanists from Marcus Garvey's time, Kwame Nkrumah, and all the black leadership that really were advocating for African unity and one system of government for the whole continent and one currency for the whole continent.
But do you think it's possible today with Africa and all these struggles?
We don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. Globalization will push Africa to unite, because it's either we unite as one people to face the rest of the world like every other continent is doing. Otherwise, I mean, we will disintegrate. We cannot continue to live in the little colonial edifice that they left us in.
As I said, Fela is an icon. But he was also a very controversial character, wasn't he? He was arrested for child abduction, as well as the possession and use of drugs. He has also quite a wild sex life, with no less than 10 wives, I think.
27.
27. That's even bigger than what I thought. Fela was not exactly an angel, was he?
Fela was human as any human being could be. Fela had his positive points and his negative points.
And what are these negative points?
The negative points are that he was so liberal. He let a lot of people do a lot of things around him that if it was in another setup, I mean, he should have been more disciplinarian, more forceful in terms of certain things in his domestic life. But in terms of his ideology, in terms of his engagement in the struggle, I mean, it was just a shining path. He was somebody that you could look up to any day.
Do you think you can compare him with Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr.?
Fela was all these guys all put into one. Fela, like an American writer in 1977 wrote, he said Fela was Huey P. Newton, Edward Cleaver, and Che Guevara all put into one.
And why do you think he does not have an international recognition, just like Martin Luther King Jr., for example?
That comes back to the fact that the African struggle has always been put under the carpet for so long. I mean, the Jewish people who suffered 10 years of Holocaust from Hitler, they are still holding the world at balls today. But who is talking about Africa that went through 500 years of slavery, that went through 500 years of Holocaust? I mean, we are talking in terms of more than 200, 300 million people involved in this. More than 100 million, remember, perished during the passage. We are not counting those.
So what do you suggest?
So the advantage of today is that we have mobile phones, we have all these social networks. Africans everywhere should be contacting themselves and discussing how we can put things together. We had, if we had this when we were running the Young African Pioneers, I think Fela's image would have been more known than what it is today. I remember, if I can quickly add this, I remember that 40,000 Nigerians, Lagosians, were watching when only 1,000 soldiers were attacking Kalakuta. If we had mobile phones, Twitters, and all this, Fela would have just tweeted, and I can imagine at least you have more than 10,000 of those 40,000 reacting against the military. That's just an example of what we can do.
And what was your role alongside Fela?
I was at the beginning just a friend. And at this time, I was working with a company called United African Company as a sales representative. But I was like going to Fela regularly, and then of course I didn't put my tie on when I went to him. And then I realized that putting a tie in the hot African climate was very un-African. So I took the decision not to put on tie, and it cost me my job. But when Fela got to know about this, he was like so proud of me. But then he asked me, what do you want to do? I said, I wanted to be a writer, really. And then he said, we've been talking all these times about creating a youth movement. Why don't we create a journal to go with the youth movement, you know, a kind of a publication arm of the movement. And that was how I came to work as one of the caretaker committee members of the Young African Pioneer within the Africa 70 organization.
Whenever we talk about your country, Nigeria, it is hard not to mention the deadly clashes between Muslims and Christians. Do you think this tension within the communities will eventually lead to the division of the country, with the Muslims staying in the north and the Christians in the south?
To begin with, there is no Christian Muslim clash. There is only a political motivated, entre parenthèses, like we say in French, clash. What you see, I was born in Zaria. I am a Yoruba from the south. I was born and I grew up in Zaria in the north. I remember in my growing up days, when it was Muslim festival, the Christians participated. We ate what they brought over from their festival. The same with the Christians. When they are having their, we give our things to the Muslims.
And how do you explain the fact that Boko Haram, for example, is attacking Christian people?
Boko Haram is an offspring of a military dictatorship. Nigeria lived under military regime for...
Still today?
Yeah, we are still under military regime because most of the political parties are controlled by ex-generals from the army. And these are the people who did not have any ideology to sell other than religion. So these guys, they construct mosques in their areas and they pay imams to do their thinking and what they say. And that's all that is happening. Nigeria, when they were trying to pass Sharia law at the beginning of, when they said that we wanted to bring Nigeria back to democracy, most of the governors from the northern states were campaigning on bringing Sharia law, and that was one of the reasons why most of them got elected. using religion as a kind of political base.
But still, the population is suffering. So what will be the solution then?
The solution is education. And when I mean education, I'm talking about African-oriented education. There's no doubt today, it has been scientifically proven that all of Africa is one piece. We have, the unity of Africa is no longer questionable, in the sense that most of the languages, most of the tradition came from the ancient African black pharaonic era, the Egyptians. And most of it, that's why you have it. You have it in all our artworks. That's why I'm talking about education. That if we educate the man in the north to realize that we have the same roots, we have the same origin, like the man from the south or like the man from the east can understand that culturally
it's the same country.
It's the same country. Then we will not be talking about Boko Haram anymore.
Fela used to sing, music is a weapon. In his music, he would often denounce corruption, social inequality, and the dictatorship of the time in Nigeria. What do you think of artists, sportsmen, and other personalities that defend certain political causes? Is that their role?
Absolutely. Traditionally, artists are custodians of history. They pass it. I mean, that's why you see in French-speaking part we call them griots. They are the ones who narrate history. They have history in their hands. And sportsmen and people who are popular if they can give or lend their time to the struggle, to make people, younger folks, aware, instead of just sitting down there and wearing Nike shoes and Nike t-shirts and all that. If sportsmen can lend their voices to this struggle, that music is the weapon of the future, like Fela said, I think Africa, a lot of political awareness will be much present in Africa today.